right now. Please have a seat as we're going to introduce you to our track 2. Topic is going to be energy, water, food, and minerals and interconnections. So our moderator is going to be the Professor of Energy and Technology Economics in Seoul, South Korea of the National University of Seoul. His name is In-Young Ho, and I would like to introduce him into the platform, and then he will introduce the moderator, the panelists as well. He will be our moderator. Finally, if you have any questions, we do have a QR code that you can scan, and we'll compile these particular questions as our moderator will address it. Sir?
Thank you. Excellencies, distinguished guests, ladies and gentlemen, members of IAE, welcome to the session. Wonder if you enjoyed your lunch. We have 5 wonderful distinguished panelists and speakers of this session. Please welcome, could you be on stage? Yes. So we're supposed to get your questions, with this iPad. We'll see how it works. That's mine. Oops, wherever you want. Yes. Well, this session's theme is quite huge. Interconnections among energy, water, food, and minerals. As you see, during the 20th century, minerals, they're not any concern to energy suppliers. Maybe copper, if you remember at our opening plenary, Daniel talked about copper. But then, these days, 21st century changed quite a lot. And then we need to face how the minerals have interconnection with energy and of course to food and water too. We get to change our energy from oil, gas, and coal to manufacturing-driven energies like renewables and hydrogen and nuclear. And these energies usually electricity, and it's not easy to store. You need batteries and you need minerals too. So the minerals all of a sudden becomes quite important to us. So by this change, we call critical minerals like lithium for batteries, they become very essential for every pathway to a clean, stable, and sustainable energy future, which is this conference's theme. But then despite their central role, global market for these critical minerals is far from perfect, not even close to current oil and gas market. So we have many problems, economical, political, and overall technical to solve and to tackle and everything. Let me introduce our speakers and panelists. Our keynote speaker is Mr. Ibrahim Hamidaddin. He is the advisor, the Ministry of Industry, Mineral and Resources of the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia. Ibrahim has had more than 20 years of experience in industrial mining, metals, supply chains of energy. He is an expert of making strategy to be converted into investment opportunities and create values and managing risks. And we have 4 experts for panelists. Next to Ibrahim is Ms. Rabia Zedawi. She is the Chief of Energy Section in the Climate Change and Natural Resource Sustainability Cluster of the UN Economic Social Commission of West Asia since 2016. She has also over 20 years of experience in oil and gas, value chains, circular carbon economy, climate change policies, and many more. And she is also the president of the Iraq Energy Club. Next to her, we have Professor Ian Lange. He is a professor and the director of the Mineral and Energy Economics Program and a faculty fellow of Payne Institute of Public Policy of Glasgow Mines. He served as a senior economist for energy at the Council of Economics advisor for both Biden and Trump administration. Next to Ian is, I believe everybody knows her, Dr. Michelle Foss, a fellow in energy, minerals, and materials with Baker Institute, Rice University. Dr. Foss has more than 40 years of experience in international energy economics policy, working with industries, government, academics, pretty much everywhere. and she was our IAE and USAE president, and she was named as a USAE Senior Fellow too. And finally, not the least, we have Mr. Karthik Ganesan. He's the Fellow and Director of Research Coordination at the Council of Energy, Environment and Water. He is a rising young expert in the area of energy, water, food, interconnections. He's expanding his research areas. Thank you. Anyway, he's expanding his research area to power sector, technology innovations, and so on. So let's start from our keynote speech. So could you please welcome Mr. Ibrahim Hamidaddin, please.
Thank you, Professor. Good afternoon. When we get invited to this event in the ministry, we were excited because we've been working on the activity of critical mineral in relation to green energy, decarbonization, and green metal. You'll see through my slides what the kingdom is doing on that regard. So, critical minerals has been lately a critical topic. So the word critical mineral shows some sense of critical issues facing the transition of energy. So let me take you through the material. We have 4 sections: energy transition, critical minerals bottleneck, action by country including Saudi Arabia, and way forward. First section. For the past 100 years, with the revolution of the industrial sector, you can see that there's a production of carbon of 1.3 trillion tons. That caused increase in temperature by 1.1 Celsius degree. In the past 50 years, Europe and North America contributed the most, but from 2000, China is taking the lead. Until Paris Agreement in 2015, when 196 countries agreed to take action to control the climate warming, and they applied 2 scenarios. One is aggressive, is not to exceed the 1.5 degree, and the second is moderate, is 2.5. So if you're gonna go for the aggressive, you will need great amount of resources, including critical minerals. And this is where the critical came. If you remember, probably 10 years ago, there was no critical mineral definition. Lately, critical means shortage, importance, essential. So this is why now you will see how the governments today, investors are looking into the critical minerals to support the transition of energy. So the transition is to take energy from black to green through gray, blue, turquoise, and green. You might be hearing different colors when we talk about metals, energy. So the world is going from black, using coal, to gray, using fossil fuel, then go to blue through natural gas, and finally we're going to be going through renewable energy that will make it green. From the slide, you can tell that renewable energy will be the source of energy in the future. No more fossil fuel that will be taking place in the coming years. If we see also electrical vehicles and electrical storages is part of the transition in energy. And the last one, you will notice that the consumption per capita is going down. So you have less consumption, less emission, more efficiency in the energy consumption. Doing the transition, there is a cost for it. If we see I'll give an example. If we compare normal car in terms of mineral consumption as of today, mostly it needs copper and manganese. But the future car require many type of minerals. And it will be, per car, you need 5 times to 6 times of what you are consuming in one car today. So you have more types of minerals, you have 5 times, 6 times of minerals. And this is why in the last 10 years it became critical. The world was not prepared for this major demand where the supply is limited. If we look at the bottom part of the graph, the power generation, if we see the natural gas was very limited also in number of minerals. But today we have about 4 new technologies or technologies that require different types of minerals. Offshore wind, onshore wind, solar, nuclear. And also they require different types of minerals. And the minerals, as you can see from the right side, copper, lithium, nickel, manganese, cobalt, graphite, all goes into the electrical vehicle and the electrical storages. So this is where the criticality came from, and this is why we need to take action on this regard. Now, we will notice that the minerals today is concentrated in certain area, not like the fossil fuel. The fossil fuel, in terms of oil and gas, you can find it all over the world. But in minerals, it's not the case. If we see the case, for example, for the extraction part, Chile is the lead. In nickel, Indonesia. Cobalt, Congo. Rare earth, China. Lithium, Australia. They are the main supplier. You don't find major supplier in terms of natural resources. However, in the supply chain, the processing, China is taking the lead. And this is where the bottleneck is. Now, sometimes you have shortages in resources, and sometimes you have a problem with the processing technology. China is taking the lead. If you see here, and the coming slide will show you that China is a major player in the transition of energy. This slide, what we can get, to make it simple, the steel, copper, aluminum are the main critical minerals that will go in electrical vehicles and energy storage. So energy storage in an electrical vehicle will need steel, copper, aluminum, nickel, cobalt, silicon, graphite, manganese, and rare earth. This was not the case for our today car. So this is where we need to focus our effort to secure all these kind of minerals. So the growth is 2.5 times of what what we are consuming today, and this is needed in just 7 years. So the lead time to secure minerals and resources, you need about 8 to 10 years. So we have a major shortage if we want to control the climate warming, to decarbonize, and to reduce the emission, and to be green. As you see, there is a gap for lithium, copper by 18%, cobalt by 14%. In terms of volume, we need by 2050 between 1.8 to 3.5 trillion tons to secure our future energy and transportation on a green environment. Critical minerals and bottleneck. Now, based on the facts I illustrated, countries took actions. If you see at the top, there are a number of countries that they define their minerals that they need strategically for their industry and for their future growth. The range of critical minerals between 18 to 35 type of minerals. The most common minerals that you need is antimony, cobalt, graphite, lithium, rare earth, and the list goes on. So, for example, Saudi Arabia, and this is why I mentioned at the beginning, we were excited to be invited, because Saudi Arabia is also working on its list, similar to what the others are doing. Now, from natural resources, here, if we compare what we need of mines, new mines to secure the supply chain of critical minerals going to the green energy, we need, in the case of lithium, at the soft scenario, we need about 30 mines, or up to 50. And nickel, between 40 and 60. Cobalt, we need 11 new mines to 17. Cathode and anode, we need in 29, 23, up to 40. So the point here is we need a lot of work and a lot of investment, a lot of efforts by the government today and maybe yesterday. The demand for the two scenarios, in the case of lithium, could reach 260% in a short period of time. The same on cobalt, graphite. But if you look at the right side, where the traditional fossil fuel consumption or coal, it's going down. There is a negative growth on the three items. So, to reduce carbonization by 13% coming from transportation and 52% from power, we need renewable energy of 50% by 2030. And 70% of cars to be electrical in order for us to reduce the emission and to do for the transition of energy. And so the cornerstone here would be the battery and the electrical storage system. So the point here, the critical mineral mainly will go to renewable, and renewable needs the storages in order to be able to supply the energy for residential and industrial. If we look at three minerals into different applications. The copper will grow in terms of applications. It will go 2.5 times. In aluminium, 2 times. In nickel, it will go by 3 times. So you will see that the organic demand at the bottom is way less than what we will need for the future energy and transportation demand. And this is where all require minerals that today we are not ready for. Now, types of batteries that we need, most of the batteries that we will be needing is for passengers. However, on-grid electrical storage system is growing fast by 35%. So this is where most of the critical minerals will be in the coming 7 years. As you can see, as of today, we are, in terms of share in dollar, we are even only 30 million, but we're going to go up to 140 million in the coming 7 years. This is interesting slide. The world is disconnected in terms of supply chain. If we see upstream, many nations like United States, Australia, Brazil, Canada, focus on the upstream. The companies over there are not continuing in their supply chain. The value chain is disconnected. And this is also part of the problem. The problem is
لطفاً أرجو الانتباه. هناك
It's okay. We're fine. It's just a glitch in the system. So please.
okay. So the value chain here is not complete. If we see for other countries like Japan, Korea, Belgium, they have also disconnect, no upstream, no downstream. They are in the midstream in the battery manufacturing. And the same apply on the battery making and the battery pack. Now, if we look at China, this is how China is contributing to the future energy. They are well connected across the supply chain, well positioned, and still growing and taking the lead over other nations. Here we are looking at the cathode part, where it requires nickel and lithium. And if you can see, I believe there are already existing 2 companies that they do the full supply chain, BYD and Qatar, and potentially one on the way, where no in the world, a company can supply the full chain. Now, knowing the problem, we need to know what the actions. Here you can see that production is not as equal as the reserve in lithium, nickel, cobalt, graphite. We need to do investment. This investment will take time. Natural resources to explore, extract, and process require 8 to 10 years. Countries are already considering investments. If we look at Korea is already going for the hydrogen fund. Canada going for critical strategy, critical mineral strategy. Japan, green metal. Australia going for the energy transformation. European and raw material fund. Australia critical mineral facility. And United States infrastructure law and reduction in inflation. Not to ignore China. China is also working through their state-owned enterprise to continue and sustain their position globally. India is initiating cooperation with other countries on the regard of the critical minerals. Now we see here countries are changing their strategy in the supply chain, the full supply chain, in the rare earth case. United States, Canada, Australia, comparing to China, they will try to supply the full chain. Now, what countries need to do? There are things that they need to do locally and internationally. From local, they need to do exploration, R&D, and to reduce the permit timeline. It takes, here in Saudi Arabia, it used to take years until you get the exploration license. Now today we have it in 3 months. So these kind of actions are what we need. You need also internationally to have joint venture ownership, and also I will show in the Saudi Arabia, and you need to secure offtake agreement. I'm not going to take, this is also what the countries are taking in action. This is for Saudi Arabia. Saudi Arabia today, I'm just going to specify what Saudi Arabia is doing today. If you can see, Saudi Arabia is doing projects in automotives and renewable, plus the activities happening in Neom City, where we have the green energy and green industrial sector. From critical mineral point of view, there is a geoscience program, accelerated exploration program, creating mining fund, all will go in support of the critical mineral. Also, we have critical mineral strategy that we are currently working on. In 5 months, we're going to have our own list similar to other nations. This is where we have our different infrastructure that we are working on the transition of energy and critical mineral. We do have on the east side the decarbonization. We have at the north, we have the green ammonia and the green hydrogen. And we have in the rest of the country, we have different activity for exploration and mining. This shows the list, what we have today in Saudi Arabia in terms of critical mineral related to batteries. Some of them are existing, some of them under study, and some are still geologically witnessed, but still in the process. Finally, the takeaway, what we can take from the 20 minutes, that we need to enhance the supply chain resilience globally. We need new investments. We need collaboration between us. We need more technology innovation. We need to consume less, produce more energy. We need recycling. Recycling represents 30 to 40% of the used resources. We can re-inject it in our use and demand. And finally, countries to be committed to the transition through real investment, real cooperation, real regulation, and real action. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much. This is kind of new topic for IAE, right? Or why I'm asking this is, I guess Michelle knows pretty much everything what has happened in IAE. Am I right?
Well,
So yeah, why don't you just go ahead
and go on?
My question actually is, what do you think is actually going on? Is it just a new opportunity of investment for a new person, or is it just an old story going on, or are we really going into a new territory, uncharted territory? Please.
Okay, well, what I need to do, I guess, since I have a couple of slides, is go up there.
Oh, okay.
Is that
Please.
the best way to do it? While they're teeing that up, I wanted to thank Ibrahim for the excellent overview. That was really great. And also, thank you. Thanks. And I also just wanted to recognize and thank Ken Medlock, who's our director at the Center for Energy Studies at the Baker Institute, because Ken is a great champion and colleague. Peter Hartley, who's here, Also, the same really wonderful colleagues to be working with as we try to build all of this stuff and get it into a form. And to answer what I thought was the initial part of your question, we had a minerals roundtable in Tokyo at the IAEE conference. Now, to my knowledge, that's the first time that actually all of this got on the table for this particular group, the IAEE friends and family, to begin thinking about in a more concentrated way, reacting to, and so on. So for my 5 minutes, I'm going to try to just peel the onion a little bit more to what Ibrahim said, but maybe in a more pointed way. But the first thing, I'm going to talk about 5 challenges. The first thing is a pre-challenge, which is data and information. We've got a panel tomorrow afternoon that's going to be more targeted to this. I want to invite everyone to go to the Baker Institute website, go to the Center for Energy Studies. We have a webpage for the Energy, Minerals, and Materials program. And what we did was scrape the U.S. Geological Survey data, combine that with data that's always available from the World Mining Congress, World Mining data, to try to at least give people a picture of where all of this stuff is, what country has what country produces what. It's not perfect because stuff moves around, ores move around in various forms until they're finally ready to go into manufacturing. But you can see market shares by countries and you can see other very interesting things. And so I encourage you to visit that. The first challenge goes to a point that Ibrahim brought up, and I want to thank him for using the International Energy Agency Minerals Report. I was a peer reviewer for that. The chart that he showed you all, minerals requirements by different applications, so conventional vehicles versus electric, alternative energy, wind, solar versus thermal energy, thermal generation. These things have consequences. If you look at that chart, what we're doing is we're trading energy density for materials intensity. And that is a really big challenge. If you look at this pie chart, most of what we produce in volume, in tonnage, around the world today is oil, gas, and coal. Non-fuel minerals is 13%. That's not a terrible number, but here's what you have to think about. This is what we need to wrestle with. We're replacing, we say, all of the fossil fuels that constitute, what, 4/5, 7/8 of world commodity production with mineral-based alternatives. That's what we're arguing we're going to do. When you think about batteries, all you're getting with batteries is energy storage. Batteries need to be recharged, so we have to replace all of this stuff again to be able to have the energy to recharge the batteries that we're putting into place. When we look at wind and solar, there's a materials intensity associated with those because the footprints are larger, but they need energy storage as well because they're non-dispatchable. So our volume that we're trying to get our hands around, our arms around, is actually much larger than the gaps that Ibrahim pointed to, because we're not thinking about all of the consequences of what it is that we actually are saying that we're doing. And I want to do one thing that I did to everybody at the conference in Houston last fall. Let's cancel the word renewables from our dictionary. That's a controversial thing to say, but wind and solar do not exist. We cannot use them without the physical equipment that makes it possible. We have to think about that and make a rational decision about whether that's the best and highest use of the materials intensity that we are facing. The second challenge is the money side of this, because one goes to the other. If you look at revenues to the mining industry, most of it comes from coal. So you go and look at BHP, Glencore, Rio Tinto, any of the largest miners around the world, they are cash flow rich right now, and it's because coal has been between $300 and $400 a ton, and it's most of what a lot of those folks produce. It's a very painful decision to think about divesting coal assets right now, because the impact of that on cash flow for reinvestment is just enormous. Non-fuel minerals, in total, of the roughly, say, $3.5 to $4 trillion in market value created by the extractive industries over the past year and in previous years, is 0.00003%. Every CEO of every mining company, every sovereign producer of minerals, every sovereign producer of minerals, wants to replace the value of oil with the value of their product. That's very clear. That was clear at the Future Minerals Forum last month. It's an enormous challenge because if we increase the value of the minerals that everybody produces, we're also affecting the affordability of everything that we're using the minerals for. So this is a problem that we don't talk enough about, one that we aren't focused on enough, but one that I'm obsessing on these days. The third big challenge is that not all tons are the same. We have a lot of old assets in the world. Most of our copper supply comes from mines and associated infrastructure and facilities that are 75 years old. This stuff can't operate forever. Some of it cannot be decommissioned because there's just no way to decommission it. It's not ESG compliant, to use that phrase, because I don't know what else to call it. You're not going to spend CapEx on these facilities to replace existing trucks with electric trucks or other things. I mean, this is the reality of our supply base. The fourth challenge is competing uses, so we're kind of in a bubble on that. In this conversation, we're talking about minerals and materials only for energy applications, but we use them for everything from agriculture to construction, durable goods, pharmaceuticals, medical needs. You increase the price of helium, you're affecting MRI scans. You increase the price of titanium, you're affecting joint replacement costs. Lithium, Adam Saminsky years ago, when we went through a phase of euphoria on lithium and batteries, sent me this hilarious email that's a souvenir for my life on antidepressants and how traders in lithium would probably need them. And you know, this is you know, we're just not thinking enough about competing uses. Defense in the age of balloonacy, you know, we've got a lot of things that we need to think about in terms of what we're doing with all of this. And the final challenge, everyone wants to count on recycling. So I'm sure y'all are talking about that here as well. We don't have the tonnage to even get close to what we need for what we want to build. And we are recycling already, but we're also doing a very good job of regulating the recycling industries in ways that are going to encumber them from going forward. And we're looking at that closely at the Baker Institute, whether it's advanced plastics recycling, for metals, hydrometallurgy, pyrolysis, gasification and related solvents. All of those are under scrutiny by our EPA, the EU, and others in ways that will affect the ability to recycle. We can substitute, and one idea I want to plant, and it's one that we're talking with people here about, is advanced carbon materials. Because you're carbon rich, you can build everything that you want to build with carbon nanotubes and other carbon materials, and that's something that we seriously have to look at, and we can talk about that in the panel.
Thank you very much. Now we go to Radia, because using a lot of minerals actually creating another issue like sustainability measure, resources area. I guess you're an expert in there too. And also, maybe we need to revise all those climate change scenario and everything. Could you give us some insight about that?
Yeah, thank you very much, and I will take the opportunity to thank our host and my second home, the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, and no better place to speak about these challenges. Actually, I was looking to the two excellent presentations, and specifically what Ibrahim presented. And to remind me, coming from the oil and gas sector, when we will look into the short market dynamics and how we do the investment, we need 7 to 10 years from the exploration to make it happen. And then we have the whole value chain. And usually when I was working in this sector before joining the UN system, we never look at the holistic approach. And this is time to look at it in order that we build sustainable future, since we speak about, as per the session, and also the conference, the pathway to sustainable energy future. While we spoke about the supply-demand balance, but I think if I may focus, you indicated sustainability. The minerals and critical materials, the way classified by different agencies independently of the scenarios, is certainly need to be looked at from the different sustainable development goals for the energy, the climate change, the economic growth, jobs creation, and all of that. It's not just about the supply-demand balance to feed to the energy sector and others. And more importantly, that I think one of the holistic approaches that I was mentioning, and this is where Since last year, we've been working on the topic within the UN system, looking to the extractive industries as a whole, specifically critical raw materials. And I think the challenges need to be taken from the economic, social, and environmental aspect before looking to the solutions, because whatever forecast we are doing, we need to ensure that the sources of the demand are sustainable in order to fit the supply, independently on which part of the supply chain you are. And the geographical distribution here, which is obviously the bottleneck, most of the resources as presented are in the less developed countries, and those obviously who didn't until now still have problem of energy access and still do not have, they are impacted by climate change. And they have other aspect is the data as mentioned by Richard is that in the oil and gas sector, we always speak about proven reserves, and here one of the critical elements that's in major part of the world, we still don't have the current data in this respect. So we need to really look at the soft factors most. And the other element, the governance. In these countries, and as long as we spoke about the supply, we have illicit finance due to the lack of good governance, corruption, and obviously we do not have the right, I would say, mechanism in order, and the need of capacity building government institutions in order to put the right fiscal regimes in countries like what we have in Africa, Latin America, for example, and in order to ensure that the private sector will have a stable environment to operate and obviously unlock that. The other element as well is the sustainable mining from the environmental aspect. I think colleague will spoke about the water energy nexus. We cannot still now, the mining sector is still very basic compared to the oil and gas sector, and need to learn from the innovation system that we have in the oil and gas sector, and specifically when it comes to the water resources, wastewater management, which has an impact not only on the operation and the workers, but it will have an impact at large when it comes to the investment. The other aspect that those who have these resources still lack financing in terms of investing in infrastructure. So how we want to build an integrated business model and to secure the supply if we don't invest and give them the right to have the whole value chain from the exploration to the downstream that we have in the sector. So in order to ensure that it's not just China and the US, Canada who do have the technology but also the sources of the supply. And the other element also is that when we speak about the environment and the social, one of the critical elements that I've noticed in one of the projects that I did in the mining sector in Peru, that it comes that I saw that the mining sector doesn't employ 14% of what it has today from a woman perspective, and in very poor conditions. So if we are moving to a much more sustainable future, and we believe that this transition will give much more room from a gender perspective, we need to ensure also that the conditions at the work level in the mining sector give the right man and woman in an adequate environment. And last and not least is that the circular economy, and not better than this place when we speak about the circular economy specifically in the agenda of the climate change, since in the mining sector you will still use the oil and gas resources, and you will, in order to unlock these resources. So we need to ensure that the circular carbon economy and carbon management technologies are well in there for producing electricity and ensuring that the value chain in those who hold the resource, not just those who does the processing. We need to, basically, the circular economy should be across the value chain and ensure that this create jobs, ensure the economic development, and ensure as well that we have, I would say, much more data in terms of the supply and then obviously the demand. So the whole story, maybe I'm presenting it mostly from a challenging perspective, but it's much more holistic, in a way that if we don't address the social, economic, and environmental aspect as an integrated approach, we will just do the same mistake that we've done in the past in the oil and gas sector, where personally, myself, 7 years before, I've never looked at this integrated approach. I was just an engineer and economist. So this just leading, look into the oil prices and how this balance. And we can elaborate later. Thank you.
Thank you very much. Here's my one. Well, let's go to Professor Lange. You're serving as a senior economist for both Biden and Trump administration, so you know quite a lot of U.S. policies and everything. Could you explain how the U.S. is doing for this problem?
Happy to, thank you. Yeah, so I would say in many ways, United States policy towards minerals is kind of schizophrenic. My favorite example from about a year ago is basically around the time that the Biden administration announced its plan for the supply chain review and the critical minerals planning that they were going to do to encourage the battery material supply chain. They also basically pulled a permit to build a road across Bureau of Land Management land in Alaska that would go to a cobalt copper mine called Rambler. So this permit had been given by the Trump administration. Clearly, we know how politics works. But this is a bit of kind of the schizophrenic policy, and they one hand were encouraging development of this supply chain, and the other hand they were sort of taking it away by not allowing access to some of these resources. Now, not all of the stories are bad. I mean, one thing that I've been particularly heartened to see is something you might expect as an economist is, if you're familiar with the way minerals work, right, a lot of these critical minerals we're talking about now used to be called minor metals. They were not the things that the mining firms are going after. Oftentimes when you do mine, you get a whole bunch of minerals, they come together in a basket, you might say, and you pull them through some refining process to look for a specific one. But as these minor metals have become more valuable and people are interested in these things called critical minerals, you see a number of investments amongst U.S. firms who have assets that are currently operating to pull some of these materials out of what used to be the waste stream. So they, you imagine you would bring a slurry or bring some dirt through to grab out the copper. There's other things in there, and so there's been some recent announcements. Rio's Kennecott plant is getting tellurium. White Mesa Mill's uranium plant is pulling out heavy rare earths. And up in Quebec, Rio's, I can't remember what the main product is, but they're grabbing scandium. And they use, again, all these things used to just go, we'll say, in the trash or in the tailings, but as prices evolve for these things, firms are responding in ways you might expect to say, hey, let's look at our trash. Maybe there's something valuable in there. So there are some positive things happening, even if the larger vision is not really moving.
Well, then you think IRA, because there was a question about China and the U.S. relations, whether